Today's episode of Comic Lab is brought to you by the Lucy Cavendish College, the fastest growing constituent college of the University of Cambridge. Stay tuned. We're going to have a great interview coming up with Dr. Joe Sutliff Sanders, a fellow at the Cavendish College that is responsible for bringing in the first of its kind graphic novel library. You're going to want to stick around for this. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up.
So, Brad, a few years ago, I'm on social media and I'm scrolling around, and I discovered this woman who's a dang delight, who has taught her dog. Her name is Christina Hunger. She taught her dog Stella how to communicate using buttons, right? Because dogs obviously don't have the ability to vocalize. They don't have like parrots do. They don't have the ability like chimps to sign. So she, being a sort of communication specialist, figured out that dogs could probably figure out 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 words. I think Stella is now up to like 40 or 50 words.
Oh my goodness.
With these buttons. And I saw this, and I know dogs are not your wheelhouse. I know you're not an animal person. That's totally fine. But I was like, I would like to experiment with these buttons, right?
Yeah.
So I buy my dog a set of 4 starter buttons, and here I can show you what they look like, Brad. They're about 3 inches wide, and they have a very wide buttony thing, right?
Yeah.
So that the dog's paw can smack it. By the way, some people use it with horses, and they mount them on a wall, and a horse hits it with his nose.
Really?
It's got a little speaker at the bottom, and you can pre-program what each button says, and then lock it down in position so a dog can learn regionally where this button is in relation to all the other buttons.
Yeah.
And it can ask for specific things. So the main dog that the woman taught, it'll say something like, Stella, want outside walk. And you're like, holy hell, that is communication. Stella, want outside walk. Like,
yeah.
You know what the dog is asking for, right?
Yeah.
So I figure I'll start small, and I'll teach my dog hey, I'm hungry, that kind of thing. Because that's an easy, quick, positive reinforcement. You say I'm hungry, someone gives you food.
Yeah.
You're going to learn that process.
Yeah.
Right? It's like basic Pavlov 101. And so I have this button, and I pre-program it to say, I'm hungry, in this cute little voice. My dachshund, who admittedly took a couple of days to warm up to this process, he didn't quite get what was going on. All of a sudden, like a lightning bolt, he figured out that if he hits the button, he gets food, right? The problem is I programmed it with this ridiculously cute little but annoying voice because I wanted it to sound like him talking.
Yeah.
And so now this is what I hear constantly as his paw is constantly hitting the button. You ready?
Yeah.
It says I'm hungry constantly. So you're all over the house and you just hear this from down in the kitchen. The dog is hitting the button constantly. I have taught him other buttons of like, I want to go for a walk and I need to go to the bathroom, right? But the one that he goes and hits, Brad, do not teach a dog a button that they can ask for food because they will ask for food all day long. They're like a 20-year-old guy in college. They'll just ask for food all day long. That's all they want.
Because they're always hungry. Yeah.
Yes,
and you say they do this with horses too?
Yeah, horses, they'll mount them up on a wall, and a horse will do it with its nose.
Yeah.
And so there's this one horse on either TikTok or Instagram, I don't remember, and she asked, like, I would like to go walking. I want to go riding now. I want to have playtime. And there's different games that they play with the horse of like turns of like tagging the nose and stuff like that.
Pin the tail on the donkey.
And it's just bonkers to realize that animals absolutely have the ability to communicate more. You just got to give them the right tools.
Yeah.
Like, it's very much in an artist sense. Like when you have the right tools, it's amazing what you can do. Literally giving this dog these series of buttons, it unlocks their communication skills.
Now we've got to change that figure of speech. We got to say straight from the horse's nose.
And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
Wilbur, I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. Well, let's jump into our first question for 2023, which is still bonkers to say out loud. And Brad, this question comes in from Eric Campling over at patreon.com/ComicLab and says, "Hi, Brad and Dave. I'm thinking about 1, 3, 5-year planning, and a suggestion Brad made in passing resonated. Taking a creative writing class.
Yeah.
Since some of us don't live close enough to take Professor Geiger's class at the University of the Arts, do you have suggestions or tips for evaluating local schools or adult learning courses to find a good class that would be a good fit? Thanks so much for the constant joy your show fills the air with every week." So, Brad, you teach a class, 2 classes, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Over at the University of the Arts, and have had great success with it. Your students love taking your storytelling class, especially. What would you give as sort of resonating advice for how to find, how to evaluate, how to decide on a class either in local community college or adult education classes? Where would you go? How would you do it?
Well, I'm going to give you some counterintuitive advice because although I'm super, super proud of what I'm able to do in my class and that I really think that I bring my A game when I walk into that room. Here's the thing. There's another facet of this I want you to think about, and that is this. As much as it's great to walk in and work with a teacher that is passionate and stuff like that, it also is important that you walk in and you are willing to bring 100% and bring your A game. And with that in mind, it kind of doesn't matter which class you take or whether you take it at this university or that university. What I want you to do is to go in and take a class and to go in and bring your passion to that class and also have the structured learning environment of doing what that teacher wants you to do and to follow the directions because there is, even if it doesn't seem like it, there's a logic to it. Trust me. Part of it is, although it's always better to take a class that has a really dynamic teacher, it's also can be just as valuable to take just any class because really all that teacher is doing is setting up a structured learning environment. And certainly you can do this on your own. That's the truth with any educational thing. The problem that nobody ever talks about is that if you don't have a reason to do this, and the class is the reason, if you don't have that deadline that you've got to hit or else you don't get the grade, if you don't have all that structure, you're probably not going to do it. It's probably why you haven't been doing it up until now. That class is valuable in that it gives you that structure and it gives you direction. Right. And if you come in, here's, I guess, my overall point. Even if you take kind of a subpar class, and if you go into that class 100% putting all of your creativity, passion, attention, diligence into that class, you can take a subpar class and get amazing things out of it because you're putting all that work into it. The bottom line is it's great to have a good teacher, but that's only one part of the exchange. And we kind of lose track of that. Well, my teacher wasn't good, so I didn't learn much. Well, no, that's not how it works. Also, if you decide that you're going to go into that class and you're going to give it 110%, you can walk into a subpar class and come out having learned amazing things just on the basis of the structure itself.
I think there's a lot of wisdom there because finding a good teacher is not unlike finding the right doctor in your life. Sometimes you only find out by having signed up with them and you go, nope, this is not the right thing. But to Brad's point, even a subpar class is better than no class if what you're trying to do is use some kind of outside stimulus to increase your writing volume and to increase your writing quality. Because you're sensing something inside yourself that's saying, I need an externality to help me get better, right?
Yeah.
And so to Brad's point, this might not be the shining light from heaven that's going to come down and go, now you're a great writer. But even just the structure of a third party that you're accountable to, or a second
Right.
party, I guess in this case,
Yeah.
a second party that you're accountable to, kind of puts you on a better path. It's kind of like, this is not the perfect metaphor, but it's kind of like saying, listen, I didn't get a great workout today. It was only 10 minutes, but 10 minutes was better than doing nothing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I didn't get the 60-minute fantastic workout that I wanted to do, but frankly, I moved my body for 10 minutes. That's better than doing nothing. And it's kind of the same thing with writing, is that if you acknowledge that it might take you 2 or 3 classes within your local community to find the writer, the writing teacher, writing coach that really sparks with you. It may be, though, that in the meantime, if you come in, like Brad said, guns blazing, ready to apply your skills to whatever sort of half-assed teaching techniques they might have, you still might get an incredible amount of value out of it.
And I also, and because I've made this mistake so many times, I'm going to caution you, because I can see this one walking up Broad Street. Again, just because I've made it so many times, you walk in and you've got a picture in your mind of what the perfect writing teacher is, right? It's
Right.
Robin Williams in what was that? Good Will Hunting, where he played the Dead Poets Society. Right?
Sorry, I thought you were going on a different.
But he played a number of teachers. Now that I think about it, but I'm specifically thinking of Dead Poets Society. You're thinking of this amazing teacher that can have you standing on top of desks saying, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," right? And instead, you get this mousy person who's quiet and maybe even seems a little bit bored, and you think, "Oh, I didn't get a good teacher." Well, no, that's not the case. You got a different teacher than you were expecting. And this teacher still might be able to teach you some things, just not the way you thought, right? And maybe isn't going to teach you the stuff that you wanted to learn, but maybe taught you the stuff that you needed to learn, right?
Right.
Don't be too dismissive of somebody because they didn't fit what your mental image of them was, especially all of us. We're all cartoonists. We've talked about this before, Dave. We think narratively, right? And so we think, oh, I'm going to take this teaching class. I'm going to teach this writing class. I'm going to walk in there. This teacher's going to be this amazing person, and I'm going to get motivated and inspired. And instead, they speak in a monotone, and it's like, this isn't what I wanted at all.
Right,
That might be true, but keep yourself open to this. Might just be what you needed. Not what you wanted, but what you needed, right? Keep yourself open to the fact that this teacher, although it doesn't look like the character design that you had when you were doing this in your mind, might just be a completely different hero that you didn't know that you were going to get.
Let me expand on that great idea, because what may happen is, in them speaking monotone and not particularly inspiring you to write, you might find a newfound strength inside of you to go, you know what, I'm going to have to generate this for myself.
Yeah.
This is going to have to be more of a self-directed journey. And sometimes that can be helpful too. What I'm getting at is sometimes the failings of teachers and guideposts can help stir you to become your own self-generating, self-improving teaching mechanism.
Yeah.
So, I think, listen, let's all be honest about it. The first one that you throw a dart at and attend the class, it's probably not going to set your pants on fire. It's probably going to be like Brad said, hello, welcome to the class. Today we're talking about haiku. Yeah. And honestly, if I was, in terms of picking what type of class, I would see if there is something that gives you sort of a brief survey of different styles of writing. Because I think that could help as far as shaking you out of what you normally do, shaking you out of your normal voice. That can help you improve as a writer. Brad, separate from the teacher, any subject matter that you would recommend in writing to try to do?
My own personal thought is focus on narrative technique and storytelling principles, right? Because what we do, no matter whether we're doing comedy, drama, sci-fi, action, adventure, it really comes down to narrative technique. In other words, this idea of how you build a story, how you build tension and release it and stuff like that, and storytelling principles, which are very closely related. You know, those basically those are two different ways of saying very much the same thing. I want to see, and on that syllabus, I want to see things like the hero's journey. I want to see things like the story circle. I want to see concepts like tension and release. I want to see those kind of things lined up. I'm not again like if you're talking like if I see the week 1 is devoted to haiku. All right, maybe that's not the class for me, but I want to see a real sharp focus on on how you build a story, how you make that happen, and how you make it happen piece by piece. And then you're going to be looking for words like narrative theory, narrative archetypes, storytelling techniques.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kind of the words that I'm looking for in that syllabus.
All right. You know what? I agree with you. And I also think it's endearingly sweet that what you just described is basically the course you offer at University Arts.
I was hoping you were literally, I was going to pull up my syllabus because everything that I've got in that syllabus is stuff that I think that you should have. And I seriously build that because I get so many students from across the university. I've got dancers sitting in my class. I've got sculptors. I've got animators. And I build that so that it for exactly that reason. So I almost, as I was talking, my finger was on the button. I almost called up my syllabus because it's like, I want everything that's in my syllabus. That's what I think you should have.
Listen, I think it's both endearingly sweet, but I think it's also true. And I will say this, it is going to be the rarest of communities to find a community college or adult education class that teaches comics writing or writing for comics.
Yeah.
But in the same way that certain musical instruments can help you with other ones, if you were to take, say, a screenwriting class or a writing for the theater class or writing for movie classes, it is not the same skill set. Let's just make that clear. But it's parallel enough that there's a lot that's helpful to you. So it's a little bit like saying, hey, learning ukulele can help you on your journey to guitar. They're not at all the same instrument, but they're similar enough where it's like, all right, I get the idea that there's frets and there's finger placement, and all right, I'm off to the races. Yeah. So I would say if there's nothing in your local community college for storytelling or narrative per se, sometimes writing for the theater or writing for the screen can be helpful as a parallel.
Absolutely, yeah. I think any kind of I don't think that I would even expect there to be a comics writing class.
No,
but keep yourself open to the fact that you can get a whole lot of other information just from a general writing class.
Although I will say, when I was 20, there was an adult education class offered when I lived in San Diego on writing for comics.
Yeah. And
I have to say, in nothing but loving ways, it was a terrible class. So
I would
like,
bet.
To Brad's point, they're not necessarily going to light your pants on fire, but it was a structure that got me writing over a summer where I was in college, I was working at home in the summer, and I was taking this class, and it didn't really get me anywhere, but it got me writing, and that's what's important. It was an externality that got me writing. So best of luck with it, and I think Brad's advice is right on point for you there.
Absolutely. So, Dave, I've got a question for you now, because I know you've dealt with this. This comes in from our Patreon backer, Planks, who says, Dear Dave and Brad, do you have any wisdom regarding professional works of artistic creation made while working for a company that, as part of their employment contract, claims ownership over any copyrightable material created by the employee? I know neither of you are lawyers, but if you have any thoughts or any experience to share, I'd love to hear it. So basically, Dave, this person works for a company. The company has all of their employees sign a contract that says, hey, anything you create either here at the company or at home, we own the copyright. And that exists. That's not unusual. But you want to create something and you don't want them to have the copyright to them. What do you do?
Yeah, it's a weird sort of like, the thing is, these contracts do exist. I've signed these contracts. When I worked for Mattel, and then again with a lot of friends that work for Disney and a lot of other people that work for different animation companies in LA or video gaming companies. I'm sure Brad can think of other ones that are not springing to mind, but these contracts absolutely exist where the company says, listen, we're paying you really well. We want to own everything from your entire creative output while you are with us. I always find it morally really dubious. This is the kind of contract that I feel like in the EU it wouldn't stand up, but somehow in America we're like, they're going to crush you. So here's the thing. Here's what I would suggest, is that this is not something that you can wave away and hope goes away, because the truth is, if you have something that you create that really sparks, the company is absolutely going to claim it for themselves.
Yep.
And you do not want to have to deal with it after the fact. So my advice is, as painful as it is, you've got to deal with it up front. And what I did, again, I am not a lawyer, but I went in and scheduled an appointment with the head IP attorney for Mattel. And I said, here's the deal. I have, and I think this is a key phrase, a pre-existing idea that I have been working on at home at nights and weekends, and I'm now here for a couple of months, and I see this clause. How do we handle this? Do I need to quit, or is there a way we can amenably come to the fact that this will be separated out from my contract as being something that I own? And in this case, this was Sheldon that I had started working on in 1999 and started working at Mattel many years later. Anyway, the IP attorney said, here's the basic idea, Dave. We only want to claim things that are toyetic. And Mattel had this phrase where anything that could become a toy was toyetic. And so we only want things that are toyetic. This is a comic strip. Could it become a toy? Yes. Mm-hmm. Is the likelihood that Mattel is ever going to turn this into a toy? No. Because we only tend to do licensed properties from a certain percentage of success. This was not going to reach that level of success. You're fine. Thank you for bringing it to us. Let's sign a one-page little memorandum of understanding, append this to your contract, and bada bing, bada boom, it was all set. Now, another way that Brad and I have actual real-life physical friends that have done this is to work under a pen name and not tell their company that they have done that. That makes me personally far more nervous, because all it takes is one slip up where a file got saved to the wrong folder on the cloud and now it's on a corporate thing, or an email gets sent from a corporate email, or a phone call gets taken at the office that gets left on a voicemail. That, like, you get the thousands of ways that a company could be alerted to the fact that you have some outside project. And all of your hard work keeping it under a pen name goes poof. So now a 5 or 10 year project suddenly becomes property of the company because they go, hey, what's this? Yeah. So to me, that seems imperfect. To me, the better way to do it is to just deal with it right up front, openly and honestly, and say, listen, I have a it's either going to be a discussion with HR or with your IP attorney or your generalized staff attorney. And say, listen, I have pre-existing IP that I would like to continue working on. I don't feel like it impacts my corporate work at all, and nor vice versa. I don't feel like my corporate work is in every way feeding into my personal creative stuff. Can I be allowed to do this? If not, then it's up to you. You might have to say, I need to step away from this job. Yeah. Now, another thing is, not every job can be walked away from. Some of us have brand new kids or a house mortgage or a car payment, and so it's an imperfect world. I know that, but I'm saying, putting this decision off doesn't make it better, or putting this conflict off doesn't make it better if you kick that can down the road.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you said. I want to rewind a little bit, because you actually had the best possible outcome when you sat down to have that conversation at Mattel. But I want to rewind, because the typical conversation goes a little bit like this, where they say, let's face it, this is not something that we would probably want to exercise copyright over, right? And so in your situation, they said, so let's do a one-page memorandum of understanding, right? What's probably going to happen is that person sitting across the table from you is going to say, listen, we probably are never going to want anything like this, so we don't have to worry about it. And then they're going to try to shoo you away. Don't get shooed away. You've got to have that in writing. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a contractual situation with somebody where somebody says, we would never exercise that right. Well, great. Let's put it into writing that you're never going to exercise that right.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't need to, they say. We're never going to exercise it. Great. If you're never going to exercise that right, I know it and you know it. Let's put it on paper so everybody knows it. You're going to have to stand your ground, because Dave actually had the best case scenario out of that. Most people in that situation have to demand, and I mean get a little bit firm, and say, hey, if we both understand that the company's never going to exercise their rights, then there's no reason not to have a memorandum of understanding. All it takes is a little bit of doing, and we can both have this thing nailed up, and we can both walk away knowing for sure that the company's never going to exercise those rights. But you may have to be firm because, like I said, that was the best case scenario. Most people going through that are going to have to put their foot, not threatening, not aggressively, but you're going to have to be a little bit firm and say, we need this in writing.
Yeah, the reason why I lit up when you said that, Brad, you probably saw my face.
Yeah.
I had forgotten that I had a friend at Warner Brothers who had sort of a handshake agreement with the manager. The manager goes away. Warner Brothers finds out about this outside project a couple years later. Bada bing, bada boom. Warner Brothers absolutely claimed ownership on this and it had to go to court. I don't remember how it settled out, but it was an uncomfortable couple years.
Yeah.
And so, to Brad's point, that's not necessarily a shot at Warner Brothers. That's any company that has these kind of contracts. Is that I really do feel like you can't just wave this away with generalities or with handshake agreements, or with like, oh yeah, we agree on this, but there's nothing in writing. It is kicking the can down the road, and it's unfortunate. But you're going to have a really, really, really couple uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
First, probably with your manager to let them know that it's happening. What you're about to do, and then with HR and/or the attorney. And what's nice right now is that it's a kind of a tight labor market, and people are having a little trouble filling positions. So it might be the best time to make this play.
Yeah.
The flip side is I had the best possible outcome for this. But I will tell you this, I was schwitzing like nobody's business when I had that meeting with that lawyer. Because basically, Brad, what I felt like is, am I offering up meat to the lion by setting up this meeting with the IP attorney? Like, am I walking in, presenting the IP to the person who could legally claim the IP?
Right.
And so it was not without risk, and it was not without nervousness on my part.
Yeah.
And it was frankly only, I think, through my ability to carry myself in a conversation and to explain the pre-existing nature of it. Thank God I had a pre-existing book that had copyright dates prior to my employment at Mattel. That helped. And thankfully, in this case, it was not toyetic in a way that Mattel would ever make money on. But in a different world where the comic strip was slightly different, was very toyetic. I had started the project while nights and weekends at Mattel, didn't do anything on company time.
Yeah.
It could have been a very different conversation,
Absolutely.
Where they might have just said, no, we're locking that down. We absolutely own that. And that's the end of that conversation. And you can either sue us or do what you want to do at this point, but that's ours.
Yeah.
And, it's again, this is a morally dubious clause. I feel like we really should allow for a separation of personal and professional life, which this clause 100% does not allow for. But it's just the shitty reality of corporate life in creative America is that this clause does exist. A lot of companies do enforce it. And I think, unfortunately, the only safe way to deal with it is to deal with it head on.
So, Dave, it's time for a few updates from previous shows, and I've got a doozy for you. You remember not so long ago we were talking about the concept of using different fonts for different character voices. And we were saying that we kind of, it's like, it's okay to do, but it can get out of control quickly because if you start having 2 or 3, 4 different fonts for different characters, it gets kind of hard to read. And we were talking about that when we were promoting the show on Twitter. And guess what? We got an official response from the Comicraft Twitter account. They go, over here at Comicraft, we have what we call the Hagrid rule. One regular character may have an unusual voice. And I just thought that was perfect. They call it the Hagrid rule. And basically what they say is, you can do it. It's fine. It can add a certain amount of seasoning to your lettering, but one regular character, and that's it. They call it the Hagrid rule.
First of all, that's fantastic. I love that they responded. And second of all, the Hagrid rule is a really funny summary because you could do it with any number of movies that you can think of. You could do the Yoda rule or this or that.
Yeah.
But the Hagrid rule of one character, because other than that, it's just nonsense. And it's good to know that other people sense that same thing that we did, which is 2, 3 characters talking each in their own unique style just becomes a cacophony of weirdness that asks too much, frankly, of the reader.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It asks too much of them. All right, well, let me jump into our second update for the week, and this one is a personal update. So some people may remember a while back that I had been watching some of the documentaries about Miyazaki.
Yes.
HBO Max had them running for a while. I don't know if they got moved off HBO Max. Anyway, I highly recommend them. I find him fascinating, even though I don't necessarily agree with all of the way he conducts his life. I think he is a fascinating person and creates amazing art. But one of the things that I always liked and respected about him is that he puts on an apron when he has to create art.
Yeah.
And to me, that was always like a mnemonic signal that it was time to focus, that now I am an artist, now I am creating art, right? And I get it that, okay, yeah, pencils could create a little bit of staining on the front of the shirt, maybe some inks could too, maybe.
Yeah.
The fact is, though, most of us are pretty controlled in art. It's not like and especially if we're drawing digitally, there's no spill over there. It's not like we're creating a mess on our front of our shirt. But so my wife got me an apron for Christmas as my Christmas gift, and I love it. I've been wearing it for so far all of one day.
I've been wearing it for one day.
Well, Brad, I'm off to a great start. But for me, I just wanted to share this update that I kind of like it that now, because we've talked about in the past how in previous homes, I had my studio external to the house. I would walk out of the back door and then walk into my studio. And so there was sort of a psychological separation of now I am at work. Now I am at home. And I don't have that in this house where the studio is in the house. So people come in with questions about like, hey, this bill, or hey, homework help, or hey, can you do this or that? All of which is fine. It's the normal, operation of a house. But something about, for me, the idea that, hey, I have a quiet signal on, I have this apron, I'm working right now. I'm not just Dave or Dad or something. Right now, I am at the job place. I'm working. I'm doing the thing. So anyway, that's my update for this week, is that I've started in on my apron journey, Brad. I'm now an apron-wearing cartoonist.
So now here's the big question. Do people respect the apron, right? If they see the apron on, do they turn around at the door and say, I'm not going to ask this homework question. Dad has the apron on. I'm going to go figure out another solution to this problem.
If day one is any indication, that's a big no, Brad. It was just as many, if not more, questions as I normally get. Also, I got this. A friend FaceTimed me while I was cartooning, and as soon as he saw me on FaceTime, he's like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah.
I said, "I'm wearing an apron." And he goes, "All right, I'd like 2 pork chops, a thin slice of loin, and can I get a couple of sausages if you got anything freshly ground?" And I was like, "All right, here we go. Here begins my apron journey."
Yeah. Yeah, I did see a photo. You did look very good with the apron. I wouldn't have said butcher because you had all your fingers still, but I would have said you looked like a very good woodworker, I would say.
So, Brad, now that we've updated everyone with our 2 updates for the week, let's jump into our next question coming in over at patreon.com/ComicLab. This comes in from Nira, and Nira writes, "Hi, Brad and Dave. I love the constant flow of creation that comics do for practice. With singular standalone images, they tend to be unreliably fleeting, but it always helped me improve by experimenting with new techniques. Comic panels have kept me creating, but they need to retain some semblance of a consistent style, if for nothing more than streamlining the process." Okay, we can agree on that. How do you rein in style changes and experimentation to maintain consistency while also not stifling improvement? That's the tricky part. Deciding hard cell shading works for you more than soft cell shading, for example. Or can you make changes every chapter, every page, every book? What if you find a better font for your balloons midway through? Do you revise everything you've done to match, or you stick it out until the next book? It's the when in the process that confuses readers, a change between panels, a change in the next book, or the what you change. So the question there being, is it when you do it or what you do?
Yeah.
Thank you guys for everything you do. So, Brad, we have had peers and friends and people that we've read that have made changes slowly or quickly, or at a book change, at a chapter change, or over the course of a year. What do you recommend, Brad? Because this is not an easy question to answer in the offset.
Yeah, no, it's really a lot of it comes down to personal preference. But I want to encourage you to embrace change, right? Because I think change is a good thing. It's how you get better. And so, yes, I do like the idea of finding a logical breaking point. You mentioned a new chapter or a new storyline or a new book or some kind of starting point. That's a great place if you find, oh, geez, I want to use this new font, or I want to try cell shading instead of this other technique that I was doing. I think it's perfectly fine to put a logical cutoff place there, and then go forward with the next thing that you're going to do. I think that's good. I think that's healthy to do. But finding a good breaking point to insert it is fine. That makes perfect sense. Doing it like if you're doing let's just say a 22-page chapter, and you all of a sudden change fonts on page 13, well, that's not so great, right? But finding a good breaking point to introduce this new technique or this new change, I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. Over the course of my career, I have done kind of every version of how you could do this, which is, one is to make a sudden change, being like, well, now I'm doing New Yorker-style grayscales. That's me. I'm Dave Kellett. I do New Yorker-style grayscales. Yeah. I did that in Sheldon for a couple of weeks, changed back. I've also done it where I'm like, I've figured out a new and better way to draw eyes. Yeah. But if I introduce this all of a sudden, it'll be jarring, so I'm going to slowly introduce it. And what that ended up becoming, and I remember when I did this in college, it ended up becoming an amalgamation of neither my old style or my new style. So it was kind of technically a third style anyway, which was unnecessary because I was trying to transition to the new thing. That didn't work. And I've also done it where, unbeknownst even to myself, I was changing styles midstream. Yeah. And as Brad said, only in the rearview mirror did I look back and go, oh, I didn't realize that I was completely changing the way, because my hand was sort of doing it, the slow evolution that happens as you draw over months and months and years. I've done them all. And I think, Brad, probably, if you're honest with yourself, you probably tried most of them yourself, right?
I've done all of those things that you talked about, and I'll tell you what, I like it because, especially as I started to change from a comic strip to a graphic novel, my style had to change very much so. And when I started, I've talked in the past, when I started doing Not Safe for Work comics, my style had to change necessarily very, very quickly because the art had a different role to play in that storytelling. And I got, by the time I was doing that, I got to the point where I just changed on a dime. It's like I did that thing where you said, yesterday I'm doing this, today I'm doing that. Have fun. This is what it is. You can swing with it. Here's the thing that I want you to keep in mind when you're doing this. There's kind of three rules that always come into play here. And rule number one is that it's necessary. It's necessary to change in order to improve. Right? That makes sense. Right. You can't improve without changing. So rule number one, you can't improve without changing. Rule number two, the one thing that readers hate is change. Right?
Oh, God, yeah.
I've told the story 100 times. I'll tell it 101 times. The most negative email I ever got was when I started doing my strip in color. I had been doing it in black and white for years. I finally was able to bring on a colorist and hire them. And I started that Monday morning in color to big fanfare, got the most negative email still to this day. I've done a lot of things in 22 years, 23 years going on of comics. The most negative email I ever got. Readers hate change. So number one, it's impossible to improve without change. Number two, the one thing readers detest the most is change. And here's rule number three that I want you to keep in mind. And this one, by the way, those first two, you're like, Geiger, I know that. Here's the third one you know as well, but you always forget. And me too. I got to remind myself. You are fishing in an infinite pond of readers. There is an infinite number of people available to read your comic. It doesn't feel that way sometimes. It certainly doesn't look that way on paper sometimes, but there's an infinite audience for you to fish from. So if you make this style change and you lose some readers, great. Go out to that infinite pond and fish for some more. And by the way, if this is a positive change, if this is a change that is an improvement change, you're going to have no problem picking up those new readers because they're going to be drawn to the higher quality that was brought about by that change, right? I tell this to people all the time that I get called in to do consultations for a Patreon. I did this just recently. And I said, okay, because this person said, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. And they were in a Discord server. And I said, hey, it was like Christmas vacation. I was doing nothing. I'm like, I'll take a look. You want me to take a look? She goes, yeah. I said, okay, you're doing this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. And she says, I don't know. I'm scared if I change it, I might lose the readers I got. I'm like, yep. And you might gain a whole bunch more. You've got to have faith in yourself. You've got to say, yes, you could lose the readers you got, and you can replace them in that infinite pool. At some point, here's the thing, that she knew what she was doing wasn't working. Right?
Right.
It's not working. You know that if you keep doing that, you're going to be at the same level. At some point, you've got to say, I'm willing to take a shot. I'm willing to make a change. And then... and the one thing that was keeping this person from making the change is that they forgot that they've got an infinite pond to fish out of. So that's why I'm telling you that story. Improving requires change. Readers heat change, but it's okay because there's an infinite number of readers for you to get from. Once you line those three things up in your mind, all this other stuff becomes, do I do it at chapter 1 or chapter 2?
Yep. Okay, so first of all, I got two things I want to say, but the first one is, I want to compliment you as a teacher and as a friend, because no matter what topic we bring up, I'm consistently amazed that you're like, now remember, there's 4 rules here. And I'm like, we just started talking about this. How do you suddenly know the 4 rules? No, I'm saying this as a compliment.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what it is, I'm like, Brad, how do I get my oil change? And suddenly you'll quantify. You'll be like, Dave, there's 6 things you need to know about an oil change. I'm like, holy hell, how does he do that? The fact that you knew off the cuff 3 rules. All right, so first of all, that was a compliment.
Yeah.
Second of all, I think there's also a deeper sort of philosophical thing about sticking to the old you when the new you wants to be something different, because our art is kind of constantly in chrysalis mode, or chrysalis, I always say that wrong.
Oh, chrysalis works for me. I like that
Does
better.
It?
Yeah.
Chrysalis sounds like a medicine. Like, ask your doctor if chrysalis is right for you. Chrysalis, we're all kind of constantly in chrysalis mode, wanting to become the next butterfly. And I say this intentionally in the sense that, like, philosophically, it's a little bit like hiding your light when you're like, no, I've got to keep the old me public because I don't know if people will like the new me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they'll like my new style, so I've got to keep doing my old version of me. In a little way, I love how, as a society, we are slowly inching toward better acceptance with our teens and 20-somethings and saying, be true to yourself and let society come to know the real you, and don't change who you are for society, that kind of thing. I think it's a hard process, but as a culture, we're getting better at that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a little bit philosophically, that's how you should approach this as an artist, that when change is happening for you, when you know you have unlocked a new level in your art, don't hide your light, like accept the change, embrace the change, and go out and say, hey, world, accept me with this new style. But, within reason, do it at a chapter break, like Brad said. Do it at a book check. Do it in a place where psychologically it at least helps your reader along to say, hey, we're a little different at this break. We're a little different. I think that's acceptable.
Yeah. It goes back to some advice we gave on the show a long time ago, which is basically don't stick with a mistake just because it took you a long time to make it. Right?
Yeah.
This is kind of what we're talking about in another way, is that, you need to give yourself that opportunity to change. And like Dave said, it also comes back to this whole idea of being your genuine self, right? The fact of the matter is, if you're drawing differently, then you better start putting that drawing on paper. Don't hold yourself back because you're scared that the readers might react badly and all that kind of stuff. We get so. You could do an entire book just on how we think about readers, right? We have this. Each one of us has this picture in our mind that our readers is this cohesive group that's the same people, and we add to it. And sometimes we subtract from it, but it's mostly the same group of people month to month to month, year to year to year. And the fact of the matter is, it's more like planets in orbit around a sun or maybe an asteroid belt, you've got a few planets that are orbiting you all the time. You're tried and true. The rest of them are flybys that are just coming by. They might never come back again, or they might come by and they're only around for a little while and they circle up. It's more like a swarm. It's more like it's something that's much less cohesive than we think about it in our brains. It's not this same group of people all the time.
Right.
And really your idea isn't to keep the same people all the time. That's nice to build those people and to convert a certain amount of those into diehard fans. But the bigger thing is to constantly attracting new people into your swarm and to constantly kind of building that swarm to a bigger swarm and a bigger swarm, getting all lined up in this idea that it's the same 12 people. And if you piss 10 of them off, then you're only going to have an audience of 2. That leads you to some really bad decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit like that old visual metaphor of you can never step into the same river twice.
Yeah.
And like with your readership, you never have the same readership that you had a year ago, 6 months ago, 6 years ago. And, continuing with that metaphor, my uncle on his farm in Gettysburg, he has a pond that he built that pulls off of a local river, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It has to allow an outlet back to the river, or else you get stagnation.
Yeah.
So I'm going somewhere with this. If you just try to hold on to the same readership that you've always had and you're afraid of change, you actually get a stagnated readership, right?
Yes.
And so you've got to allow for new people to come in, and you've got to allow for some people to be like, this change is not for me. I'm going away, and that's okay too. So here's another thing that I want to before we move on, I want to talk about is that depending on what kind of comics you make, I want to heavily advise to try to avoid going back and retroactively redoing all the old stuff to match the new stuff, depending on what kind it sounds to me like you're doing panel work, single panel work based on this question. If that's the case, boy, there's few worlds that allow more for style changes than panel work, right? Single panel comics. So I would heavily advise you not go back and redo fonts or redo cell shading or redo this. Let it exist as it existed and have the new stuff exist as it came to be, and never the twain shall meet. If you're doing story-based comics and you change fonts somewhere in chapter 1 or chapter 2, right? Okay, that seems like it's going to be a pain in the ass, but maybe you do want to have a consistent font throughout one continuous story that will eventually be published. I grant you that. If there's certain low-hanging fruit when it comes to light coloring techniques or light line work techniques that maybe you can fix, yeah, I get that if it's a story-based stuff, but I just don't want you to become recursive in that the changes you make now, because I've done that too. It's a mistake I continuously make is that I got to match this early thing on Drive to this thing. And it can become recursive real quick. So you just got to be careful of that. Don't you think, Brad?
Yeah. There's got to be a line that you draw because you can end up chasing your tail real easy. I think the phrase low hanging fruit is really the byword there. If it's something you can do easily and it's going to make you feel better, then great. If you're going to end up losing hours and hours and hours of work to this, then you got to give it a second thought and say, maybe it's not worth it. Remember, that print version is the permanent record of what you did on the web. And it's okay if that reflects all of the things you did, including the changes that you made. That's okay if it reflects that. Right? If it's if that printed record says that you did one type of shading for 2 chapters and another type of shading for the rest of the ongoing work, that's okay. That's okay. That's part of the record. If it's something you can easily change and it makes you feel better, go nuts. If you're going to lose hours to it, not so great. Not so great. Now you got to think twice about what you're doing.
Yep.
Dave, I'm so excited. I got to tell you who we've got with us on the line right now. We've got Dr. Joe Sutliff Sanders, a fellow at the Lucy Cavendish College and an American scholar of the genre of comics. And Dr. Sutliff Sanders is behind the first of its kind, ambitious graphic novel library. Let me tell you a little bit more about this. This is happening at the Lucy Cavendish College at the University of Cambridge in the UK, and it's the first of its kind permanent collection of graphic novels. With multiple new academic journals on comics and graphic novels launched in recent years, it's a cutting-edge discipline, exactly the sort of subject for a library such as this. This initial core collection, which is intended to expand in coming years, supports interdisciplinary research by curating influential graphic novels from groundbreaking Indigenous and LGBTQ plus authors, women, and people of color. Dave Kellett, I present to you Dr. Joe Sutliff Sanders, the man behind all of this great stuff. Welcome, Joe.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Please do call me Joe. Call me Joe.
Fantastic. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. This is exciting for us because Brad and I are both practicing cartoonists, but also lovers of the history and the academia side of comics. I rightly or wrongly, stupidly or brightly, I ended up doing 2 master's degrees in the history of comics. So I am so on your page in terms of rooting for you with the establishment of this collection.
That's so great.
First of all, before we get into the idea of the collection and how the library will proceed and how it will work, let's talk a little bit about how you got the spark as an American academic in Cambridge to get this started, because this is really a cool thing to get rolling.
Yeah. So, okay, the University of Cambridge is such a strange place in just countless ways. One of them is that there's this weird relationship between the university, who is my employer, and the colleges, such as Lucy Cavendish College. And so I was already working for the university. I'm in the Faculty of Education. I specialize in children's literature. And then I joined Lucy Cavendish as a fellow. And I said to them, there's no really substantial collection of graphic novels anywhere in the university or any of the colleges. If we wanted to, this is one of those rare times when somebody could just take a field, right? We could just be that college. We could be that library that people go, oh, well, if you want to study graphic novels, there's a place you have to go. It's Lucy Cavendish,
Yeah.
And so that's where all this came from me, was that I said, we could just jump right out and own this field. And the college didn't need any real convincing. They were excited about it in part because it was so weird.
Yeah. That's kind of amazing, that especially for a university that tends to be a little bit more slow moving in things like this. That speaks a lot to how they clearly must respect you as an academic. That they're like, yeah, this sounds great. Let's do it.
I think I was able to convince them that it was this sort of edgy, outside the box project that they would want to be identified with. I'm not sure anybody is terribly impressed with me, but they loved the idea because they could, because it fits with their profile, right? It's a college that is really aggressive in bringing in working class students, really aggressive. In fact, it was founded as a mature women's college only, and then later became women of 18 years up. And so it's always been a place that's been this right on the bleeding edge, trying to do things that the traditional university would not normally make room for.
Right. And so as part of the pitch and as part of establishing it, is there a core collection that you're being allowed to pull from other assets of the university or college system to start? Now we're starting with 100, 500, 1,000 books, or are you starting completely fresh with a list of hoped-for titles that you're looking for?
Starting completely fresh. fresh.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So one of the real delights of this program is that I got to design the core list, right? And this was my job, was to figure out from the beginning, where do we want to start this collection? And that's fantastic because I'm a lifelong comics nerd. I was reading comics before I could read, right? You guys you probably had the same experience where before I took letters and put them into words and made sounds with those, I would have a comic book out on the floor in front of me and be inferring this story from it, right? So one of the fantastic things about this is that a lifelong comics nerd is at the wheel.
Yeah.
God help us all, is at the wheel of this project. And as I've been designing this, I've been really proud of this effort because we're starting this collection with the great graphic novels by women, queer people, indigenous people, people of color, creators of all other marginalized identities. And don't get me wrong, we're also buying your Neil Gaiman, your Jack Kirby, your Alan Moore. Of course, all of that is going to be in there. But we're starting this library with exactly the people who are usually left as an afterthought. And that's part of why I'm just so excited about it.
Well, and then let me ask you this, because a lot of those books that are so important to capture for history and for academia and for future generations had, I think we can all admit, sometimes smaller print runs than they deserved. And so they might be harder to find or harder to even source as historians. So how does one, because I guess a better way to ask this question is, Brad and I have been cartooning now for a combined, 45 years, 50 years, something like that. And we're into the academic side, and we keep an active eye on the industry. And yet, we're continuously surprised by entire fields of comics that we previously didn't know existed. You know what I mean? We'll suddenly stumble on and are surprised that, oh my God, not only do they exist, but they have a huge audience. And how did I not know this, even after decades of working in the field? So, the process of discovery and of finding all that there is to be found in graphic novels, that's both exciting, but that's got to be a huge challenge for you as well, right? To not just get the low-hanging fruit, but to find the lower print runs and the harder to find ones. So just out of curiosity, what's the plan for going about in this search? Because that seems like a big challenge.
Well, so fortunately, our people, comics nerds, are enthusiastic about evangelizing, right? We are enthusiastic about, perhaps an understatement, that we love telling other people about the stuff we love. So one of the things that I've been able to do is keep an eye on social media, keep an eye on blogs, keep an eye on podcasts, where you have people who are talking about this kind of thing from a certain perspective. And they are really great at keeping me up to date on the stuff that's out there. Now, I miss a lot of stuff, definitely. But what will often happen, it's kind of what you already said, what will often happen is I will come across somebody who's an indigenous fan of comics, and that person will say, oh, you got to read this guy. And I'll say, really? I've never heard of that guy. And she'll be like, yeah, as a matter of fact, he's got 10 books, and, he's been invited to Angoulême, and he's been, and I'm like, oh, I'm the idiot here. Sorry, thank you very much. So that's how I do it, is I pay attention to our people, and they're really good at keeping me up to date.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I'm jealous because you basically have a lifetime of discovery ahead of you in terms of finding all these amazing communities and unlocking them. So as the library starts to physically take shape, for people not familiar, will this kind of collection be a reading library, an academic a lending library, first of all, or a reading library, a repository? What type of physical library do you anticipate it being?
Yeah, we have to figure out some of these details still, and this is partly because the relationship between colleges and the university is weird. But here's how I envision it. The way I envision it, first of all, is that it's a physical part of the Lucy Cavendish College Library, and that it will be a place that is open to anyone who wants to research comics. The lending might be a little more difficult to work out, but it is a place you can come to and consult these materials in a warm, happy environment surrounded by all sorts of great titles. So that's how I'm envisioning it.
Yeah. Now, Joe, I know that we're going to have a link in the show notes that's going to help people if they want to make a contribution to this library, a monetary contribution. They can help kind of make this happen by clicking on that link and making a donation. But like we said pre-show, a lot of our listeners are comics artists. The first thing they're going to want to know is, how can I either suggest a book? How can I get in touch and evangelize? Or how can I send my book to be included in the library? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the best way to do that is to contact the librarian at Lucy Cavendish College. And you can just Google that, Lucy Cavendish
Yeah.
College Library, and that's going to lead you eventually to the librarian. If you have trouble finding that, you can Google me, Joe Sutliff Sanders, and you'll come across my page, which has my contact information. So the library it's an academic library, which means that it is going to have certain regulations about what it can accept, what kind of condition it has to be in, what rights come along with that, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not the kind of thing that I would want to say categorically, yes, I can take this book or I can take any book. It's really up to the librarian. But that is how they would do it if they wanted to. The one problem with this whole dream is that we need donations. Specifically, we need monetary donations. And I hate asking for money, but the place that I found at Cambridge that was eager to support this dream of mine is my fabulous college, which is Lucy Cavendish. And Lucy Cavendish College is one of the poorest colleges in the system. In fact, I think it's in the bottom 10% of the 31 colleges of the university. And there's a good reason for that. Lucy Cavendish was founded in living memory, so it doesn't have, 500 years of taking profits from land or something like that it rents out. It started out as a college specifically to serve mature female students only. And even today, it's more interested in drawing together a student body that is diverse and working class than it is in investments. So that's why I have to ask your listeners to consider helping us out. If they just Google Lucy Cavendish College graphic novels, that'll take them to a page where they'll see an interview with me. They'll find out more about the collection. There's a button to donate. And so this is what I'm doing is I'm asking all my fellow comics nerds to come riding to the rescue here. If you can donate even just the cost of one graphic novel, you'll be changing the opportunities of this conversation for forever, right? You'll be making it so that some working class kid who worked their butt off to get into Cambridge can find a library with the world's best graphic novels, and that kid can become the next great writer, illustrator, editor, publisher, reviewer, or and I know this idea is crazy, university professor, who then goes on to turn on the next generation of kids to the becks that comics can offer.
What you're saying is if you want to support people that have boots on the ground kind of active expression in this, right? People who are out there doing the work, not in an ivory tower, but somebody that's actually going out there working with people and connecting directly. This is the place.
Yeah, this is the place. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a worthwhile endeavor too. The comics unfortunately have gotten short shrift in academia and in academic circles, and yet have an incredibly powerful impact in the world, as all three of us know, and as the listenership knows. And so when you Google graphic novel collection and Lucy Cavendish College, you're going to come on a URL. It's going to be a long university type URL, but you'll know you're in the right place when you get to lucy.cam.ac.uk. That's the basic Cambridge Lucy Cavendish URL. But you're going to want to Google Lucy Cavendish and graphic novels, and you will find the page. Nice big button there waiting for you for donating to the collection.
And I've got good news for you, because I said our audience is very, very enthusiastic. And of course, the first thing they're going to want to do is send a book. But here's another good thing about the Comic Lab audience. This is a group of people that knows the importance of crowdfunding. And they know that that even a small donation, a $10, $20 donation, like you said, the price of a graphic novel, these folks know that those add up to big things, because let's face it, most of our careers are based on crowdfunding, where little donations, little pledges add up to something big. So I'm very, very excited to see how this blossoms in the future. Because the good news is you've got a group of people behind you that understand the assignment when it comes to crowdfunding.
That's true. That's a good way of looking at it.
That's a great point.
Now, Joe, before we let you go, I got to ask you this. There's been, if you're going to talk graphic novels and comics history and all this stuff, and Dave and I are great lovers of all of it. Of course, you talk about some of the bigs like Spider-Man, Superman, Batman. Let's just take Batman for an instance. There's been so many iterations of Batman. You had the Adam West Batman. You had Frank Miller's Dark Knight. We've had Batman in the Michael Keaton Batman in movies. We've had all kinds of Batman. What is the most influential Batman out of all the Batmans?
Well, oh gosh, what is the most influential? So I'm an academic, so I'm immediately going to start trying to split hairs on that word. But you know what I'm going to do instead of that? I'm just gonna follow my bliss here and say the answer to any question that boils down to what is the best Batman, and this is a scientifically proved answer, is Batman the Animated Series. And I think we all know that Batman the Animated Series is the great turning point in Western culture. I think we all kind of know that. I think we kind of know that.
You've got a good point. It was 1992. Bruce Timm did the character designs and also gave us a visual. As a matter of fact, I used this in my TV story analysis class. It also had an amazing pitch Bible for the series that I put up on the screen.
I actually have not seen the pitch Bible.
It's amazing. Yeah, I use it every semester. But those character designs and just the way they produced that, giving it that dark look, as I remember, they worked from dark to bright visually, instead of doing white paper and put dark lines on. I think you've got a good point that it's probably one of the best.
Now, and I have to come clean with you here. I actually published a book about the animated series last year, back in 2021. So I am deeply invested in the answer to this question.
Oh, fantastic!
I'm deeply invested.
Well, for folks to be able to follow up with that, what is the title of that book so that others can go?
Yeah, it's a little hard to remember. The name of the book is Batman the Animated Series.
Wow, that's a great title.
Now, Joe, you've made it too hard for me, Joe. You've made it too hard for me.
That's right. It's Batman the Animated Series, and my name, Joe Sutliff Sanders, and there you go. You find it. There's this really fabulous series from Wayne State University Press. You guys are going to love this. You and your listeners will be really interested. This whole series, they're just short books. Each one is about a television show that you can make the argument it was a milestone in some way. So like one of my best friends did a book about The Wire. There's a book about I Love Lucy. There's a book about the Adam West Show by a buddy of mine as well. And so it's in that vein. It's this idea of, you have an academic bringing rigorous, careful, close reading, but following something that they're passionate about. So it's not all cold and detached. It's all sort of giddily nerdy the whole time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to, building off that idea of passion and following your bliss too, I genuinely want to say thank you because you have brought your passion, your bliss to an art form that all three of us and all the listenership loves and knows that it has a direct impact not only on the way we developed in our lives, but on the way kids can develop in going forward and on the way the culture, broadly speaking, can develop. And the fact that you are bringing in voices that oftentimes get ignored in academic circles, I really applaud. And in general, I wish nothing but the best for you with this endeavor because it's one of those things where for comics, broadly speaking, you need to have academic voices championing how wonderful the art form is. Yeah. And so it's a rising tide for comics when wonderful folks like yourself lift up the art form and say, this is worth being studied. So genuinely, I thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for saying all of that. I very much appreciate it. And, I'm not the first person to do it, right? There's a generation of comic scholars before me who are fantastic. But can you believe, isn't it just a wonderful world to wake up in and go,
yes,
there are smart people, I'm not even including myself here, there are smart people who are reading the things I love and seeing the value in them that I also see. Isn't that beautiful? It just feels good to be in that world.
That's a wonderful thought. You don't look quite old enough to remember this far back like I do, but I remember picking these things up in the drugstore. right?
Sure,
It was just a little magazine rack in the corner of the drugstore.
Yeah.
If you would have told 12-year-old Brad Geiger
my gosh.
that someday that he'd be talking to a professor who was going to be doing all this amazing research and preservation of that art form, he would have been tickled pink. So, on behalf of that 12-year-old and all the other 12-year-olds, thank you for the work you're doing, and do keep us posted on how this goes. This is Dr. Joe Sutliff Sanders. He's behind the Lucy Cavendish College permanent graphic novel collection, and we cannot wait to see that this thing become a huge blossom and do meaningful work in the world of comics. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. I really love this. Thanks a lot.
And on that note, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes are edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And I want to tell you guys, thank you for continuing to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's been tremendous. The growth on Spotify in particular, even into the new year, has been wonderful. So thank you for that. And I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/comiclab.
How many buttons do you have for the dog?
So far, just 3. I've got one that says I want to go for a walk,
Yeah.
one that says I need to go pee, and one that says I'm hungry.
Okay, so we've covered the main body functions, right? Walking, peeing, and eating, and I'm hungry.
Which, by the way, my wife says those 3 pretty much apply to me, too. Like, that's all I need. I just need those 3.
If I gave you more buttons, what would you put on them?
Well, so the amazing thing is this woman has gotten into, like, and this gets deeper than we want to talk about. She's gotten emotional where the dog now says Stella loves Christina, right? And I'm like, how the hell do you reach that point where you teach the concept of love or affection to a dog? I think the better ones would be like play or car ride or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can't teach Ollie to be like, Ollie, do taxes. Ollie, help with mortgage. What else is there left to teach? I don't know.
You need a button maybe for respect apron. Maybe that can be one of your buttons. Time for podcast. We can have Ollie could become like an assistant editor to the show. They can keep things rolling around here. Brad, talk less. It can be a button.
I like that you and I are barreling through the podcast, and just in the background we hear jokes. Ollie, no like joke, cut out in editing.